Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Freeman podcast. It's a great pleasure to have you on this podcast. So, this episode is all about the 7 dimensions of soulness. I know this might be the first time that you're hearing the word soulness, so I'm going to explain what soulness means and what the 7 dimensions of the soul is, and then how we can use these 7 dimensions towards creating our reality, because these are the fundamental laws guiding the creation of our reality, of our day-to-day reality. So before we get started, let's roll the intro. Because you just adhering to the same principles called Freeman. I mentioned earlier. How do you solve this? What ideas?
Traders, welcome to the Trader series. So on this episode, the chapter, welcome to the Profitable Trader series. So on this
Alright, so the word dimension comes from 2 words, which is die, and that di simply means more than one, right? Die means more than one. Then mention simply means measurement, right? So dimension simply means more than one measurement, right? More than one perspective, right? So that's what dimensions mean, right? So you can apply dimensions in your daily life, in basically everything. Like in math we have dimensions, right, which is shapes and all that, but then that's not what I'm talking about in this video. So the dimensions that I'm talking about in this video are the dimensions of the soul, right, or the dimensions of our soulness, right? So the dimensions of our soulness are the expressions of our soul. So what the word soulness means is consciousness, right? It's just a different word. It's another word for consciousness, right? So you can either say consciousness or soulness. It's the same thing, right? So let's not get lost in in words, in defining things as this or that, right? There's no such thing as this or that, because all that exists is just one, right? There's just oneness expressing itself in multiple individuations, right? So we're going to be looking at the dimensions of the soul, right? The dimensions of our soulness. And we have given the soul so many names, right? We call it the soul, we call it the spirit, we call it God, we call it consciousness, we call it so many things. But then it's not all about the name, right? You cannot experience water by saying the word water. You can only experience water when you touch the water, when you feel the water, when you experience the water, right? So instead of trying to group things into words, let's try to feel, and let's try to understand within, right? Let's try to understand the true essence within, and then by doing that we can really connect with our truths, right? So when it comes to the soul's manifestation, right, there are multiple densities where the soul can manifest, right? There are multiple realms, right? So the dimensions I'm talking about is not realms, but then the dimensions that I'm talking about are the expressions of the soul that guides the soul throughout multiple manifestations and multiple expressions, right? It is you can call it a law, right? It is the laws of the universe, right? Or the dimensions of the soul's operations, right? So there are 7 core dimensions of the soul, right? So the first dimension of the soul is the I am, right? That is the first dimension, right? So the I am is all there is, right? The soul, right? Because there's only one soul that exists, right? There's just one soul that's individuated into multiple forms, right? So at first there's just the I am in the first dimension, right? And then the I am in the first dimension, just imagine the I am as your consciousness, right? You here, right? So your consciousness, which is every other person's consciousness as well, because we're all connected, decided to experience itself, right? So the I am knows that yes, I am, right? But then how do I experience what I am, right? So by asking how can you experience what you are, the second dimension was created, right? So the second dimension is the dimension that creates movement, right? Is the movement, it's the dimension where polarity was created, or duality, right? And we know that movement can't exist in the universe without duality, right? Without polarity. So we have the North Pole and the South Pole. So for every, I don't have my ball here, but then for every object, right, even yourself, you have a North Pole and a South Pole, right? So for there to be movement within the atoms, right, there had to be something that was created, which was duality, right? And then the only thing that made duality possible, the only thing that made polarity possible, the only thing that made that movement, the only thing that makes life itself possible is love, right? Love is that movement that made that created the second dimension, right? So the only reason why the first dimension would decide to experience itself by individuating, right? We've seen how cells divide in under a microscope, right? That is like a kind of the same thing, right? So by individuating, the only thing that can make a cell to individuate is love, right? Sharing what is in this whole, making it in another whole that is still part of the entire whole, right? So now the second dimension was created, right? And then the second dimension is where the I am can be this or that. So the I am can be either the North Pole on a magnetic the magnetic north or the magnetic south, or the I am can decide to be a planet, the I am can decide to be this bottle here, or this clothes that I'm wearing, or this body that I am in, or this earbuds, or this stuff beside me, or this wall, right? So the I am is the I am individuated into everything that there is, right? So now that's the second dimension. Then now, okay, so I have individuated into everything there is. So how do I now experience everything there is? So I know that I am, and I know that I am this. So I am first dimension, then I know that I am this second dimension, right? Then how can I experience what I am? Then that is how the third dimension was created, right? So the third dimension is the experience of the I am and the that which I am. So let's say I am a doctor, right? So you know that if you're a doctor, then you can only experience you being a doctor in the third dimension. That's where you can experience you interacting with a patient, physically. That is where you get to interact with blood, with organs, with a whole lot of things, right? It is the material experience of things, right? That is the third dimension, where you get to experience the I am and that's which you are. So if you're a footballer, you get to experience it in the third dimension. If you're a musician, you get to experience it in the third dimension. If you're a speaker, you get to experience it in the third dimension. Anything at all, right? You get to experience it in the third dimension. That is why when we look around us, there is a wide variety of experiences going on, right? There is an infinite amount of experiences going on all over the planet, right? And at no particular point, there are no two individuals having the same experience on Earth, right? There are no two individuals living exactly the same reality on earth, because just like we explained in our previous episode on reality, it all starts within, right? And is projected without, right? So no two persons on earth are having the same experience at the same time. So there are multiple experiences that you can have on this planet. That is why it's such a beautiful planet. So that shows us how an example of what the third dimension is, right? So the third dimension is the experience of that which I am, right? And the only way you can experience that which you are is through the illusion of separation. That is why separation is an illusion, right? I am not separate from this bottle, and my clothes, this clothes right here, is not separate from me. Every single thing is interconnected, right? And then once we understand that every single thing is interconnected, that is oneness. But then in the third dimension, we get to experience things as separate, right? So now I may think that this clothes is different from who I am, which is this. Okay, let me just talk about my physical body, right? So let's just say this physical clothes looks separate from my physical body, and my physical body looks separate from this physical chair, and my physical body might look separate from your own physical body and all that. But then every single physical manifestation is just a collapsing of energy, just like a clump at a particular point, right? So this clump, this energy that collapsed into this image that you can see as me, that you can see as Charles, right, is the same energy that collapsed into an image that you can see as yourself, right? It's the same energy that collapsed into every single image around you, every single thing that you can see around you, right? So we are all the same, right? But then because we are currently in the third dimension, because Earth is third dimensional, we experience length, we experience breadth, and we experience height at the same time, right? And then when it comes to time, we experience past, present, and future in the third dimension, right? But then these are only third dimensional experience, right? You can choose to just experience yourself in the third dimension fully if you wish, right? But then there is another dimension to yourself, right, which is the fourth dimension, right? So the fourth dimension is the dimension of yourself, where is like the dimension that contains every single thing that manifests in the third dimension, right? It is a place where time and space does not exist. And a good example of the fourth dimension is your dream states, right? So you can recall that when you go to sleep and then when you're dreaming, like if you're in your room in your dream and you think about something, that thing comes to you instantly, right? So if you're in your room in your dream and then you think about going to the parlor, right? The parlor, your room all of a sudden turns into the parlor, and then you might think about going to an airport, and then you walk out of your door and then you just walk into an airport from your parlor, right? So you might think of going hiking on Mount Everest, and all of a sudden your backyard becomes Mount Everest. So there's no point, there's no space, and there's no time. So there's no point where you're moving from point A to point B, right? Every single possibility is folded within one another in the fourth dimension, right? So the fourth dimension is where all that manifests, every single possibility that manifests in the third dimension exists. But then you can't experience those possibilities. You can only experience those possibilities in the third dimension. You can only know those possibilities in the fourth dimension, right? You can know those possibilities in the fourth dimension. You can explore, you can learn about the information that those possibilities hold in the fourth dimension. That is where astral travel, astral projection takes place, when you get to move around your astral body and you get to experience things that happened in what people in the third dimension will call the past. But then you get to experience both the past, present, and future events. You get to experience them now, right? So that is the fourth dimension. So every single thing exists and every single thing is happening at the same time in in one eternal now moment, right? So every single thing is happening in one eternal now moment. So the fifth dimension, right, is now the dimension where you're like, oh, so I've created the third dimension where I get to experience myself. I've created the fourth dimension that contains every single possibility, and there's no space and time. And then the fifth dimension is like the awareness that you are the I am, you individuated, individuated with love, right? Which is the second dimension. And then you experience yourself in the third dimension, and you're aware that every single thing is happening at the same time, right? So the fifth dimension is where you're aware that every single thing is one, right? You have the awareness of the first to the fourth dimension, and you see how we are all connected, right? So when most people in the spiritual community talk about 5D awareness, right, it's all about becoming aware of our oneness, right? Seeing that, understanding that this third dimension where we experience things as separate from one another is just an illusion that we created, just like every other dimension, so that we can be able to experience ourselves, right? And because when you understand that it's an illusion, you don't go saying, oh, it's an illusion, but then why do you create an illusion? But well, you create it so it serves you, right? It serves the purpose, just like every other dimension is having its own purpose, right? So the third dimension is having its own purpose where you get to learn, and it's a wonderful experience, right? And when you see the beauty in everything, when you see the oneness, you get to see that, oh, so every single thing is connected. And in the fourth dimension, there's no such thing as past, present, and future, right? Every single thing is happening here now, right? So when you get to understand that, when you get to really get that, then that is like the 5D awareness, where you get to live it, right? In your daily activity, when you're interacting with someone, right? You know that that person that you're interacting with is you as well, right? When you're doing anything, right, you understand that whatever you're being, doing, and having is not separate from yourself, right? So that same way, you understand that whatever thing that you want to be, do, or have, right, you can create it for yourself, right? Whatever you want to experience in the third dimension, you can create it for yourself, because you have understood, you have an awareness, you have a full awareness of who you really are from a perspective of what you have created, right? So now the fifth dimension is now understand this, all these dimensions are not like separate from one another. It's not like here's the first, here's the second, and here's the third. Every single thing is folded within you, right? Every single thing is folded within yourself, right? And then this dimension that we are living right now is just because this physical body is more focused on this dimension, right? That is why when you go to sleep, right, you can experience multiple densities, you can go to multiple realms, you know, in your dream, because you're not physically focused, right? You're not focused on this physical body. So this physical body is just made to focus on its environment, right, on this third dimensional environment. And then you have like you have an astral body that you can use to travel through the fourth dimension as well, right? Like you don't need to go with your future physical body. You don't need to go with your physical body. That's if it's possible. But then like in your dream state, right, you're not dreaming with your physical body. If not, all those crazy dreams you have, you just wake up and find out that you have all the effects in your body, right? Probably you were in an explosion in the dream, and then you wake up and your body has exploded. So like nothing can harm you, right? That is why, you know, in the dream there's no such thing as harm. That is why if you die in your dream, you just wake up, right? Because there's no such thing as death. You know, death is just a transition. So in the fifth dimension, when you are aware of your fifth dimension, right, you are aware that every single thing is one, right? So you can choose to participate in the third dimension, but now you're not participating with the mindset of separateness, right? You're participating with the mindset that we are all connected and every single person is one, right? And we are all love. And then the reason why we are all here is to experience ourselves, right? Remember, the reason why the I am decided to individuate itself, the reason why the only soul that is decided to individuate itself into infinite number of souls, it's only because of love, right? And then you understand that, and you know that that's what we came here to experience, and love is the only reality that is, because love is what holds everything together, right? Love is what creates this pain, right? And like scientists know this, right? Without movement there's nothing that will exist, right? That is why the atoms are always spinning, right? That is why your molecules are always in motion, right? Your body is always vibrating. That is why energy is always in motion, right? And then you look at our solar system, the earth is always moving around the sun, right? That movement is love, right? And then you see our sun is moving around the Milky Way galaxy, right? And then that movement is love as well. And you see the Milky Way galaxy is spinning, as well as trillions of other planets and suns as well in it, right? And then that movement, that spin is love. And then our galaxy is spinning around in the universe as well, and then that spin is love too. So just like the Hermetic principles, as below, as above, so below, right? So what you can see on an atomic level, you can see it on a universal level. And then once you start to see this, you start to realize, you start to get glimpses of what a fifth dimensional awareness actually is. And then when you start to get a glimpse into what a fifth dimensional awareness actually is, then you can start to experience more, and then you start to become more aware of how interconnected things are and how you are the creator of your reality, right? That is how powerful the fifth dimension is, when you become aware of it within yourself, right? And then the sixth dimension is like, okay, so now you have the fifth dimensional awareness, which is you're aware that everything is one, right? You're aware that that reality is moldable, and you can create reality, you can mold different realities into what you want, and you create your own experience, right? You now say, okay, so how do I create, right? Then that is the sixth dimension, right? So the sixth dimension is the pathway for creations, right? And then in order to help you understand the sixth dimension very well, I'd like to call in the seventh dimension, because the seventh dimension is like the dimension where all the perfect ideas for the full expression of the soul exists, right? So all the ideas that you held when individuating as the I am in the first dimension, every single idea that you held in the first dimension before you individuated, right? Every single perfect idea, every single possibility exists in the seventh dimension, right? And then in the seventh dimension, that is where most people refer to as heaven, right? Most of our books refer to it as heaven, because it's this perfect place where every single thing is in harmony. You have realized who you really are, and you know that all that exists is love, right? And you're constantly looking for ways to create more loving experiences, right? So the seventh dimension is this realm where these ideas that burst out into light exist, where we most often refer to as our imagination, right? So now the sixth dimension is the pathway where that information in the seventh dimension gets passed through to the fourth dimension, from where it expresses itself in the third dimension, right? So the sixth dimension is what most religious books refer to as the archangels, right? Or what most people will call angels, most people will call the messengers, right? So the sixth dimension, these are just physical attributes, right? But I'm talking about energy here, right? So the sixth dimension is like the pathway that connects that information towards its manifestation, right? So you have a fifth dimensional awareness. You know that you are all connected with every single thing, and then now you're looking for what the new possibilities that you can create, the new image that you can innate, and that is where you go into your imagination, right? You innate images, and then those images that are busting out in your mind that you're seeing, they are the images that are flowing through the seventh dimension, right? Those images are there perfectly, right? The perfect ideas are there. So any idea that you get, no matter what you want to do, the idea is already perfect, which means that the means of its completion is there already, right? You can't get an idea on a MacBook without also having access to the ideas on how to build the MacBook, right? Just like when Steve Jobs got the idea to build the mobile phone, right? You don't like build the mobile phone by focusing on what's outside, because the mobile phone is not outside yet, right? So you build the mobile phone by focusing on the idea of that particular thing, right? So once you focus on the idea, then every single information that will lead towards the full manifestation of that idea will flow to and through you, right? So that channel where the ideas flow to and through us is the sixth dimensions, right? That is why we are all messengers, right? We are all messengers because we are all channels at the same time. And when we start to become aware of these seven dimensions, we start to become aware of the aspects of ourselves, right? And how we create our reality, right? Through these seven aspects of ourselves. And these seven dimensions can also be related to the seven chakras in the body, right? Starting from the first dimension, which is the I am or the crown chakra, right? And then the second dimension, which is the pineal gland, right? And then the third dimension, which is the throat chakra, right? Which is where you speak things into existence, right? In the third dimension, your words are vibration, right? Your words are power. Anything that you say, you're actually casting a spell, right? So the real meaning of spell is to spell something out, right? To spell a word out, right? And then any word that you spell out is going to has in itself is a seed that has the possibility of attracting seeds like itself, right? So you understand that every single thing that you're saying, every single thing that you say with your voice, every single thing that you voice out is what you will attract, right? But then for you to voice something out, you have to first, the energy has to flow in through you, through the I am, which is through your crown chakra, and then your pineal gland. You see the idea, and then you create the idea, which is the third dimension, and then the fourth dimension, which is the fourth chakra, which is the heart chakra, right? Is where you're connected to every single thing, right? And then, all right, so the fourth dimension is your chest, then your heart chakra, and then the fifth dimension is your solar plexus, right? And then this area, and then the sixth dimension is your sacral chakra, which is just above your reproductive organ, right? And then the seventh dimension is your roots, right? Which is just this area around your reproductive system, right? So the fifth dimension, which is your solar plexus, right, is the part of your energetic system that holds all the energy about yourself, right? It is like, just like as I explained in the section on the fifth dimension, where I explained that the fifth dimension is the awareness that every single thing is one, right? So all the information about yourself, right, is contained in your solar plexus, right? And then the sacral chakra is the pathway that holds all your information about yourself, as well as the root chakra, right, that connects you with your roots, which is the part of creation, which is the seventh dimension, where energy, where there is an outburst of light, right, where energy bursts into light, right? So that is how our recreation, right, if you look at how we create our offsprings, right, it comes from our root chakra, right? So the root chakra is where those perfect ideas for our expression lies, right? So the perfect idea for your own expression lies within you, right? And then as a physical example of that, when you express energy through your root chakra and you get an offspring, that offspring is an evolved expression of yourself, right? So when we understand how the universe works and the dimensions of ourselves, then we understand that we can mold reality, right? We can create reality, we can create our own things that we can experience, and we understand that we are the creators of our reality. And then we really understand our soulness, right? Really understand the expression of the soul, right? Because consciousness is the expression of the soul, but then there is no difference between consciousness and the soul, right? Just like looking at the ocean is water that appears to be blue, right? So the appearance, you could refer to the appearance as consciousness, and then the water as the soul, but then there's no difference between the water and its appearance. It's all the same, right? So let's not get lost with labels, right? So that is why I chose the word soulness. I don't know whether I'm the one that came up with the word, but then I just heard the word in my head and I was like, yeah, that's a good word, right? So our soulness is like the expression of our soul, and when we understand the core dimensions of the expressions of the soul, then we can now express ourselves to our highest potentials, right? Understand that we are infinite beings and there is no limit to what we can be, do, or have. All right. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and as you can see, every single episode contains clues leading to the next episode. So it's just like a movie, right? So make sure that you have watched the previous episode to understand more about this episode, right? Like in the previous episode we spoke about love, and in this episode we explained how love is what created the individuation, right, from the first dimension to the second dimension in the first place, right? So we understand that, and then that is how we just keep on progressing. So I'm so grateful for every single one of you that just keep on tuning in to the knowledge and the information that is contained in this podcast. I'm so deeply grateful. So thank you so much for tuning in to yet another amazing podcast. Stay blessed, and remember that you were born free. Namaste. Aloha.